goals is similar to the considerations for doing inquiries more generally, which is that you should have a clear focus, a defined scope, understand what the problem or the issue is, and what the likely outcomes are going to be that you can contribute to having an impact with this study. Maybe because you think it could lead to investigation, or maybe because there's a particular regulatory issue. So all of those hold in terms of considering topics for green transition goals. But in terms of the focus on the green transition that needs to happen and needs to happen really very rapidly, I'm going to pick up again where I left off, which is what are the challenges that we know are here in terms of adaptation to climate change. And I'm going to pick up on work on food markets, where this adaptation challenge is greatest, and where we are now is one of the regions of the world where these challenges are greatest. So you may not know, but Kenya, the Horn of Africa region, had the worst drought in 30 to 40 years until a year ago. Now, what has that got to do with competition issues? Well, the prices would rise to the import price, right? Because they'd be able to import. Now, international prices in the world have gone up because of the Russia-Ukraine war, etc., other things, so prices would have gone up a bit. The prices in Kenya for the staple maize went up at least 40 to 50% higher than the import price that they should have been importing from a region very close by, which is the best area in the world to expand agricultural production sustainably right now, which didn't have a drought, which is only 1,500 or 2,000 kilometers away in Zambia. So you have a very big vulnerability to adaptation to climate change. Now the rains here are good. This is different. And Southern Africa has it. But close by, because it's quite localized, you have regions with good rainfall and abundant arable land without deforestation. The markets are not working because the price the farmers are getting in Zambia for their maize is being suppressed, and the price that buyers are paying in Kenya are being inflated. This is core competition. This is competition 101 cross-border, but it's not easy to resolve because there's a lot of policy and regulatory things, because it's cross-border. These are food markets, agricultural markets. It's very sensitive, so it's kind of easy to say, but it's not easy to do. And so there's a really, really big role for choosing these areas, these parts of the economy which are going to be affected, which we know are going to be affected, and for competition authorities saying, wow, okay. Some large food corporation is because the competition authority can sort through all the different reasons for why this happens. And these are all reasons in markets. Is it transport costs? Is it non-tariff barriers? Is it cost of regulatory compliance? Competition authorities can find out from the traders exactly what all those costs are. Those are all private costs. Those are all not transparent. This is the work that we're doing with the COMESA Competition Commission, with the Competition Authority of Kenya, and looking at how these kinds of issues can be adapted. So that's the exacerbation of the effects of climate change. It's also undermining the adaptation in terms of the investments that are required by farmers, in terms of different farming methods, storage facilities, irrigation, etc. Because there's a whole set of investments that are required to respond. And the question is whether those investments in storage facilities are made by the very, very large incumbents and reinforce their market power, or those investments in storage facilities, buffer funds, etc., are made in a way which are pro-competitive and benefit smaller and medium-sized participants in the market. That is the question right now in front of the countries here, and the question is what can the competition authorities do about that? And we think market inquiries are a really big area to select and scope for this purpose. But the good news is that this is what's already starting to happen. And we'll talk more about that in the breakout session tomorrow. So that's a little promo for the breakout session at 9 o'clock tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I think for me, I would suggest that competition authorities need to take into account the indigenous knowledge that is playing a very crucial role when it comes to issues of mitigation and adaptation to climate change. We need to look into the existing plans the plans and the policies at the local level. I'm actually talking about Kenya, because we're a bit different. We have both the national level and the county government level. So at the local level, competition authority needs to really look at the existing plans, which takes into consideration the various aspects and opportunities that exist in most of these county governments, because they're endowed differently and they're impacted differently to issues of climate change. So they also have different opportunities for investments into this renewable energy or investments on sustainable agriculture practices. So we need to scale down and look at what's really on the ground. That knowledge is also very important in terms of also getting to understand the preferences that would be there, and that will also be part of what will be informing the markets for these green enterprises.
Thank you, Mr. Asher. Now we move to our second theme, which is the market study or inquiry handling. Market study to achieve or advance green transition goals could be similar or different to any other type of market studies. Here, the question that Mr. Sauter will answer is there any best practice that could be followed when conducting market studies or inquiries to achieve green transition goals?
I can now also see you, which is a nice thing. In the Netherlands, we have a few best practices to offer in this respect because our focus has been on providing general guidelines on the applicability of the competition rules to sustainability agreements and providing specific guidance in the context of individual agreements. And we have published most of these in order to create a broader sense of legal certainty in the market. Market investigations would seem to be advisable where there is a lack of industry initiatives in a particular sector due to particular structural problems. In other words, they seem to be useful where direct intervention is required rather than simply creating space for sustainability agreements within the scope of the general competition rules. If I would have to say anything about a best practice in this context, I would think that you should conduct broad consultations before identifying which sector to investigate and establish clear prioritization criteria. Thank you.
Thank you. Maybe we'll have a follow-up question later on that. Recently, the UK CMA releases its electric vehicle charging market studies. Mr. Roberts, can you share with us some of the lessons that could be learned from that study?
Thanks. I think this is a great case study of what a market study can do to anticipate the kind of changes that are happening and understand where those changes may be locking in an anti-competitive position, a first mover that's really locking in and therefore undermining the uptake. So the CMA, the UK CMA, first of all, opened the study simply to find out who owned the charging points along the main motorways in the UK. Very simple question, but not obvious because they're all through sets of licensing arrangements. And they found out just through using those powers of obtaining information that one company had exclusive leases over 2/3 of all electric vehicle charging points in all the service stations next to the highways in the UK. So obviously that was a quasi-monopoly position, and that would mean that they would charge prices along those lines, and they would be a gatekeeper effectively for electric charging. And of course, electric charging is going to be related to how quickly there's an uptake of electric vehicles, because if I drive a vehicle, I want to know I've got charging points that are available. It's going to undermine wider investment potentially. It's going to lead to higher prices. On the same day they released the results of the study, they initiated an investigation of anti-competitive conduct. So they released the study, initiated the investigation. As a result of the investigation, they got undertakings which reduced the exclusivity to end in 2026. So it was balancing the reward for the investment innovation. The first mover had made the investments. Cool, they deserve a reward, right? You've got to calculate what that reward, make some judgment call on this, but it's going to sort of reward that first mover innovation and risk taking, but at the same time not lead to all these competition problems. So they had a whole set of provisions which they negotiated, which were undertakings. So you have a study with a clear focus leading to, in this case, using an investigation as a tool to get undertakings, closing the investigation, getting a remedy. The exclusivity ends in 2026, and there's more to it than that. And I think that's the kind of thing that authorities can be doing. There's the kind of low-hanging fruit, I think, if one thinks about what matters for the green transition. And these are the kind of things that potentially matter. And I think there's a lot of lessons that can be learned. It can seem very complex, but actually there's some lessons that can be learned. And a huge area for cross-pollination between authorities around a very exciting area, I think. So we're all very depressed about climate change, but from a competition point of view, this is really interesting as well, and it's a really great challenge, I guess, from an intellectual point of view.
Thank you, Mr. Roberts. Before moving to the next theme, I will also pass the floor to Mr. Sampa to hear his perspective on best practice to conduct a market study to advance green groups.
Thanks a lot. Best practice in market studies. Green transition initiatives has basically four dimensions. You have resource efficiency, social inclusion, protection of natural resources, and you have economic growth. So what you're trying to do here is that under the resource efficiencies, for example, such as water, how can one use the resource efficiently and reduce on waste? Social inclusion, you need these initiatives to be part of the vulnerable, to be part of this green dimension study. So what we are basically trying to say is that when you're carrying out a market study, it cannot just be one that looks at pure economic principles. It has to include environmental principles as well, such that it does help for you to come up with best practice, or at least recommendations that would lead to you coming up with policies or recommendations that would help, be it if it is a market-based instrument, taxation, subsidies, to an area where you feel that maybe a particular company which has benefited from subsidies, because these companies, as Simon had said, will lobby the government. They want to maintain their position of their dominant position or their position of advantage. If it is an issue of regulation, it is a matter of looking at the policies and the laws that may be affecting the market. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sampa. Our last theme is about the recommendations and remedies. We start with Professor Sauter. Are there institutional settings that are in place in your jurisdiction that makes implementation of market study or inquiries, recommendation or remedies easier or more challenging for competition authorities trying to achieve green transition goals through market studies, even though this would be a hypothetical question considering that your jurisdiction hasn't done any such market study?
Yes, thank you. As mentioned, the setting in the Netherlands has been less conducive to market studies or inquiries involving sustainability. There is currently no general market investigation tool that allows us to impose remedies. That's the main problem. We have, however, carried out sector inquiries under the existing competition rules, such as in the area of healthcare, that were followed up by voluntary commitments by companies, but we couldn't impose remedies. In the run-up to being granted market investigation powers, such as by means of a new competition tool, sector inquiries could be considered useful. The ongoing energy transition is a likely area of focus, possibly in the area of charging systems for electric vehicles, which, as we've just heard, has been the subject of studies in other states as well. Another area of interest might be the abuse of non-compete clauses in labor markets, about which questions have been asked in the Dutch Parliament. Thank you.
Thank you. We end this part with Mr. Sampa's perspective.
My conclusion, what? Oh, remedies. I see. The challenge really here is the provision of, whether the provision of the law is broad enough to cover green transition or goals. The public interest, which I spoke about earlier, could be stretched, but this is bound to be challenged. Further, authorities' mandate to deal with green transition or goals, whether they have the expertise, whether they have the resources, and whether the regulators that have been charged with green economy can want the concurrent jurisdiction that would come in there. So therefore, competition authorities probably would need to engage with the regulators early on before you start a market inquiry, so that you then do plan to take into consideration the aspects of the regulator and the competition authority. Thank you.
Thank you. Before the concluding remarks, we take maybe one or two questions from the audience, if any. We take it as... Okay.
Hey. Hello? Hey. Hello? No. Yeah, almost no. Okay, so as many of you know, currently in the European Union, there are protests of farmers against Green Deal, climate policies, and in result, we observe two conflicting interests. One is competitiveness, being competitive of farmers. Being competitive. Shall I repeat the question or? Okay. Okay, so as many of you know, currently we've got the protests in some of European countries against policy which is aimed to mostly protect the climate. And farmers claim that they are becoming unable to compete when like adapting to those policies. And I would like to ask any of you who would like to answer this question. Imagine that being an official of competition authority and official who is responsible for advocacy. What would you recommend, for example, to government? What kind of approach and what kind of actions to somehow make this conflicting interests, this difficult situation between protection of farmers being competitive and protecting climate?
That's a great question.
So that's a great question and a really important one. First of all, I think obviously I'm not familiar with the particular nuances in the EU and the situation of farmers there. But I think that that not just within markets within the EU, but along international value chains, supply chains, the burden of the costs of the transition are not being shared equally. The burdens of those costs are going to be depending on the power within those value chains. And if you have a cartel in those value chain, then that's going to then play out, for example, or a dominant position, that's going to play out in the burden of the costs. Of course, a lot of the costs need to be supported through government direct spending, subsidies, taxation. So that's a big part of it. I think what competition authorities are able to do is to say, well, let's understand if the way this is being done is going to increase the unfairness or the imbalance in terms of the burden of those costs. Because, you know, farmers in Kenya who are exporting to the EU are bearing a whole lot of costs of compliance. But they're not able to, if they have protests here, nobody in the EU is going to notice, right? But that's happening right now in work that we're doing on citrus, for example, fresh fruit, etc. So this is happening all the way along there. So competition authorities are clearly just a part of the jigsaw puzzle. But I think they're not, the risk that they are seen, or competition authorities are seen as irrelevant. My point is no, because if we're going to have a fact-based engagement about this, then one needs to understand the concentration, the market power, the costs that are involved in each of these stages. And market studies and market inquiries is one way to find this out. And a very powerful way to find it out. Not across all of agriculture, so I think you've got to really choose your areas in which to focus, and have all those other complementary policies, which is the role of government, that has to be there as well. So not overreach necessarily.
Thank you, Mr. Roberts. I will check with Professor Sauter if he would like to add anything?
Yes, it's an interesting issue. Farmers have, of course, been among the primary beneficiaries of European integration. But what they seem to be lacking currently is a future perspective in the context of the more clear sustainability goals that have been set out in the context of the Green Deal. I should add, though, that as far as the competition rules are concerned, new guidelines have been adopted in relation to agriculture as well, providing additional leeway for agreements among agricultural producers and producers' organizations in order to pursue sustainability goals. So to the extent that they're interested in doing this, they're being given additional space to carry out initiatives. But it is a very complex political problem at present. But the main thing is that we should be looking forward and not backward, which is what a lot of the protesting farmers seem to be doing. So they need to be given a sense of perspective and a future perspective.
Thank you both for the answer. Is there any other question? Okay, that will be the last one.
Okay, thank you. My name is Gideon, and my question is directed to Professor Simon. Professor mentioned that competition law is an obstacle to green collaborations, and I think this must be something that came from the stakeholders, especially companies involved in the various economic activities. But I will all agree that the object of competition is actually to promote innovation. And my question is, because I believe if such an issue is raised that our laws are actually obstacles to green transitions, then what that means is that there's a need for us to ease maybe some of the provisions in our laws to encourage or to promote these kind of collaborations. But the question becomes, how do we, or where do we draw the line between, encouraging or promoting those kind of collaborations, at the same time not killing the spirit of innovation in our companies or our market players?
Thanks. I mean, I think I want to say that although I've emphasized the role of competition authorities in identifying where anti-competitive conduct will undermine the green transition, that, I mean, as Prasad said, I mean, there is a very important role for how do you provide comfort to collaborations for companies. I just want to bring us back, though, that companies in those collaborations are always going to have an incentive to frame the outcome of those new rules and new regulations in ways that will build, as Warren Buffett said, build moats around them that protects their position. And this is not necessarily going to be a good thing. I think the second thing, I think, is just coming back to the point that competition authorities have the powers to obtain information, and they must do that, not believe what companies have said. So if you've got a collaboration and you approve the collaboration, which may fall foul of cartel laws because of sustainability objectives that you calculated, it is really critical that the authorities obtain the information on those companies' costs, investments, etc., and monitor that. And this means, I think, a real investment in analytical capacity, take as well as the data gathering powers that you see in a differentiated products merger, for example, or a cartel, and saying we need to actually have those kinds of resources. And you may say, well, how are we going to get the budget for that? Well, the cost of approving those collaborations and making mistakes to the economy is much bigger than any resources you're going to require to monitor whether those collaborations are, how those outcomes are working. They're potentially going to slow down these transitions. They're going to exclude smaller market participants. They're going to raise costs to consumers who may be choosing the greener option. So those costs are orders of magnitude much bigger than the investment. Now, you have to persuade governments then that this markets authority role justifies that bigger budget. And that's maybe where the advocacy challenge, one of the agenda items for this working group should be, how do we persuade governments for these additional resources in order to be able to undertake these tasks? I don't see anybody else who's going to undertake these tasks when it comes to allowing these collaborations to go ahead and verifying whether there's anti-competitive outcomes or the efficiency and sustainability benefits that are claimed.
Thank you. So now we are at the end of the panel. We pass the floor to Mr. Sampa for the concluding remarks.
Thank you very much. In my concluding remarks, I would say that advocacy is not necessarily a preserve of competition agencies alone. And businesses will also advocate to the government and ensure that they protect their interests. And I want to sort of pick up an example that happened in my country, where a sugar company advocated to the government for a particular health issue, vitamin A fortification in sugar. That was meant to help the micronutrients of the Zambians who did not have that vitamin A. And the consequence of that was that a dominant position was formed, and the price of sugar was maybe 2 or 3 times that of the world market price. So the fact that you do have businesses and the businesses will advocate as well, I think sort of makes the more reason why market studies should be undertaken by competition authorities, so that they have this evidence-based sort of solutions to the problems that this may have. Let me end there. Thank you.
Okay. In terms of my parting shots, I would say that competition advocacy is still a new concept to the local level. And it will be important that we take this information down to the people so that they're able to appreciate that competition has its advantages, so that even the consumers at the local level need to appreciate and support the process. Also, the green entrepreneurs also need to appreciate and support the process. And by that, there is also huge space for green transition actions at the rural levels. So we need to take much of our energy into actions that will spur competition down in the rural areas as opposed to the urban areas. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll pass the floor to Professor Sauter.
Yes, thank you. I will try to link my closing remarks to the question about collaboration and potential anti-competitive agreements, because this is what, as an authority in the Netherlands, we've been focusing on. So we haven't been focusing on market investigations, but on providing legal certainty to companies who wanted to connect in order to pursue sustainability goals. You might be worried that that could be a cover for anti-competitive agreements, but there are several checks that we carry out in order to ensure that what they're doing is actually sustainability oriented and often also necessary in terms of overcoming first mover disadvantages that may exist in terms of pursuing sustainability. In the first place, you should be sure that progress is actually the objective of the agreement. Then there has to be a fair share for consumers out of the benefits. Any restrictions have to be indispensable. That's an important test, and I refer to the agricultural rules adopted earlier, and their indispensability is actually the key test. And finally, the agreement shouldn't eliminate competition. So I think market investigations can be part of a package of measures, but they should include also providing general and individual guidance. And it should be avoided that market investigations replace market initiatives and act as a delaying factor. And where they are used, they should have teeth to be able to follow up where problems are found. I think providing legal certainty for own initiatives of industry should take priority. However, in their absence, there is likely to be a role for market investigations. And in this case, prioritization and transparent selection of the sectors that are addressed is key. And it's also important that enforcement powers should be sufficiently strong, such as the ability to impose proportional remedies. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor. And last but not the least, Mr. Professor.
I think I've had too much of the time already. No, I think I just want to reiterate the importance of this working group focusing on these issues going forward. So this is these are learning. So the ACM, obviously in the Netherlands, has huge capacity relative to most of the authorities that we work with. So they may have solved a lot of these problems, but I think the work group here can really, it's a huge benefit to focusing on these challenges for countries with less resources. And the other point I'd want to make is clearly that mobilizing constituencies is really, really important. Different constituencies around us is really important to make these kinds of changes. Holding out the opportunities that exist in this transition, in actual fact, for greater inclusion, mobilizing those constituencies is an important part, I think, of the advocacy challenge.
Thank you. And I will end by saying thanks to the organizer, but to you also, the audience, for your questions and your listening. And we hope that this panel helps contribute to the discussion around the importance of market studies and inquiries as a tool to build capacity and increase knowledge about markets to enable competition authority to make evidence-based recommendation. So on that, thank you again.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Just hold on for a photo. So, yes, just a few minutes. As they take a photo, I would like to appreciate them once again. They kept us awake, and it's really late in the afternoon. So can we give them a better clap? So thank you very much. So for tomorrow's sessions, we've made a bit of an adjustment. The photo. We've made a bit of an adjustment so that we do not spend so much time setting up. So we'll start with the breakout sessions in the morning at 9 a.m. So breakout session 1 will be on this side, and breakout session 1 will be on competition advocacy in digital markets. Breakout session 2 will be in the middle section, which is on AFCFTA competition protocol. And breakout session 3 will be on the lower part, which is on agriculture and food markets. So we start at 9 a.m. to run until 10:30. Then we'll go for tea break, and after that we'll do plenary session 3 that talks about building economic blocks, advancing regional integration via competition advocacy. So another announcement is we have a competition, and whoever uploads uploads most photos and tags Icn Advocacy Workshop, hashtag Icn Advocacy Workshop, will win a very, very good reward. Third announcement is Nairobi has very good nightlife. Make sure you take advantage of that. So we'll see you all tomorrow, and the tea is served outside there. Have a good evening.